Hello there. Don't watch that. Watch this. This is the heavy, heavy Jeff sound of Brexit and beyond. Firstly, as ever, please kick that YouTube algorithm up the jacksie by giving this video a big fat like. Now to the BBC, or the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation, as we Brexiteers lovingly call it. Will it still be here in its present form come next Christmas? Or will it have been sold off to an American broadcasting company, say a newly formed Trump TV conglomerate? Will we be reduced to watching the likes of YouTube for our news, or is that swing already far advanced? But while Brexiteers lament the BBC's descent into PCdom, the lefties would try and have you believe that it has become a megaphone for the right. Yes, they do claim that. As if. I've watched enough breakfast shows and question times and other political programmes to know that is definitely not the case, and not just on the BBC either. I've watched as panels and sofas stuffed with socialist Remainers have faced off against that solitary Brexiteer who as an aside usually sees the hordes of Remainers off, while that sole voice of Leave has to face the withering glare, tuts, cut-offs and grilling of the chairperson. A chairperson who then turns to the lefty Remainers and showers them in rose petals and the gentle massage of a few mild questions. And all the while a completely unrepresentative studio audience, heaving with Labour-loving Remainers, howls at Brexiteers and Tories whilst trying to convince a nation that everyone thinks as they do. Well, if the BBC is the voice of the right and Brexit, as those socialist Remainers would have you believe, then the Beeb has a funny way of showing it. Unless, of course, it's all a deep and devious plot of reverse psychology. And a deeply flawed plot by its programme controllers if all that results is a defunct BBC with lots of its staff on the dole, don't you think? And even the broadcaster and former government equality Tsar, Trevor Phillips, said that although the BBC was the nation's most important cultural institution, he also said it now risks digging its own grave. And he also said, from the constant sly digs in its comedies to its relentless fascination with minor players in the Conservative soap opera, it breathes Tory scepticism. Its drama adopts the opposition's catastrophist agenda, painting Britain's leaders as incompetent fools manipulated by malevolent, conspiratorial geniuses. Acceptable may be at the Edinburgh Fringe, but perhaps not from a national broadcaster. So it's no wonder that Prime Minister Boris Johnson is looking at clipping the wings of our Auntie Beeb, is it? So here we are almost dangling at the end of another year, and one thing has become very clear. In the past 12 months or more, the BBC has been ramping up its programme of political correct indoctrination, harder than ever. We watched as beloved TV shows and cultural icons such as Doctor Who fell victim to the diversity machine as the motor of cultural engineering goes into turbo mode. Whilst many did not approve of changing Doctor Who's gender, most were still prepared to be open-minded to see how it would develop, because most people are not sexist. But surely we don't need to force a gender change on what is a traditionally male role. Why not just invent a new female hero? Or is that the real, hard, creative part? Inventing something really new? But that's another story. Actually, the problem with the last series of Doctor Who was each episode was like being beaten over the head with a large diversity stick until you cried surrender and agreed to identify as a purple penguin. This PC cultural engineering has been building up a very long time. Just consider Doctor Who. Didn't he start out all those years ago as an old white-haired man, and ended up today as a young woman. And as I said earlier, we've all watched the anti-Brexit liberal left dominate audience demographics on live political shows such as BBC Question Time, to the extent that the Rubicon has now really been crossed, where the BBC's remit of impartiality has been breached so flagrantly that it no longer functions within those parameters of impartiality under which it was set up. Since when did the public broadcast service acquire the right to demand payment from its viewers to re-educate those viewers on their concepts of morality? I can understand bias in support of the nation in times of war, a real bias and propaganda for the sake of our national survival, a bias and propaganda to protect us from violence and real harm. But bias where only political thought and hurty feelings are concerned? Surely we're now going too far. Since when was it okay to demand elderly people, who mostly voted to leave the EU, pay for the content that openly ridicules them and their views, and mocks their traditional values to boot, while trying to just about rob them of their choice to vote to leave? Since when was it okay to pay sanctimonious television personalities and Z-list celebrities 6- and 7-digit salaries or more to look down their noses at the rest of us? I wonder how long the BBC would persist in producing such content with that current liberal left PC agenda, were the licence fee to become a voluntary subscription service, instead of carrying a criminal offence not to pay it promptly. Of course, a hardcore audience for PC content would remain robust in places such as Islington and the other metropolitan centres. But outside that, a huge gap in the market would emerge for productions that actually reflect the morals and cater for the demands of the majority of the nation, and not just towards the minority. And you have to wonder how long the liberal Islington elite could continue to afford such a luxury. No wonder they insist on the rest of us forking out for it on pain of a criminal record. I don't want to spell this next bit out too overtly because of the PC thought police now hiding, it seems, in just about every corner of our society and social media. However, the BBC has also, it appears, embarked on a mission to create a new and false perspective of the demographics of our nation within its cultural engineering drive. And that is the most insidious aspect of the BBC in recent years. Why can't it be portrayed as it actually is? I'll leave you to work out for yourselves what I'm driving at here. The BBC could try and tell us that it has the task of educating us. And you know what education means for the liberal lefties, don't you? My answer would be indoctrination and attempted brainwashing through what is falsely advertised as entertainment and news is not education. It is blatant social engineering. And when you go down this route as a broadcaster, you are instantly declaring that your viewers are just clueless, manipulable pawns sat there mindlessly sucking up the propaganda while having their internal human firmware upgraded to the latest politically correct version. They may as well put a warning on the screen: don't switch off your TV until your firmware update is completed. And that, I'm afraid, just doesn't work. Well, except maybe for those that have been more recently through the education and university systems. Seems to work on them. I wonder why. And that would also explain the plethora of cooking and Strictly Come Slobbing programmes the BBC daily inflicts on us, and many of those are quickly becoming just gravy train vehicles for so-called stars most of us have never heard of or had forgotten or thought were dead. The problem is, when you try to program the morality of a nation like this, it will in the end backfire. It could in fact have the inverse effect and cement the traditionally held values in even further. This is the same BBC that turned its studios into playgrounds and grooming centres for the likes of Jimmy Savile, who, let us not forget, was the face of the BBC for youth culture entertainment over the course of a generation or more. Yet the BBC still offers itself as the UK's bastion of morality and British values. But the real problem for the likes of the BBC, ITV and Sky are the new kids on the block of Netflix, Amazon Video, Apple Plus and more importantly YouTube, all of which are overhauling the traditional broadcasters. And remember, technology has a way of redefining the audience's viewing habits. Just as when theatre surpassed the campfire gathering, silent cinema took over from the theatre, the colour talkies replaced silent movies, and TV took over from the cinema, etc. And now through the internet, filmmakers can earn money directly from advertisers and others, all based on their own efforts and not on who they know. And according to friends of mine within the film and television industry, YouTube is the emerging market for productions, where some YouTubers have budgets to hire professional camera crews, etc. Lucky And these new independent content creators are driven to create their own self-selecting audiences. They fill or even create their own niches. And with the more recent streaming service technology comes immediate reactive audiences who will define the content for the future. In fact, this is, I suppose, a sort of technological theatre. The creators will be giving the audience what they actually want, not what some authority deems they must or should have. So unless they find a new way to operate, the archaic edifices such as the BBC will be viewed as having run their course and maybe not a moment too soon. But a more deeply rooted problem for all our broadcasters these days is that, as they try to rewrite our national history, our geography and our demographics so as to try and convince us the past was different from its reality in order to make us more readily accept the changes they wish imposed on us, there will come the realisation that many of our old newsreels, of the Pathé News variety for example, are actually telling a completely different story, a true story, at odds with the ones being currently spun to us. Just consider how the PC Brigade would want to have you believe London was like a century ago, and then compare it to the reality of those early films of workers on trams and horses and carts. There will come a realisation that all those old printed volumes with those pretty picture plates in them are at variance with the fictions they are now attempting to spin us. There may well come a time when the existence of those old films, those old audio tapes, books and photographs of 100 years ago become dangerous because they differ with the modern, brainwashing portrayal of what life was like back then. We already hear such murmurings from our university campuses. And how long before those behind those murmuring voices are sat at the head offices of our broadcasters, libraries, bookshops and radio stations? Why can we not just accept our history for what it is? But further, this rewriting of our history via the likes of the BBC to try and force the diversity agenda on us will, unless checked now, lead to the inevitable modern-day version of the burning of the books, if it hasn't done so already. And as warned by so many, that famous book 1984 by George Orwell will inevitably spring to life as an instruction manual for the establishment, as the guide on how to control the future by rewriting the past, making chosen words and concepts illegal thought crimes. But the good news is that we have the technology of social media, a technology that is extremely dangerous to those that would control our knowledge and attitudes. We can spread the truth of our past, and we can point out the lies of those that would try to expunge our heritage. And that is why there are so many attempts to try and control social media and the internet. But control it not for our benefit, but for the benefit of those who would wish to control us, our actions and our thoughts. And in the UK, the BBC is at the heart of this PC drive. Don't agree? then why, for example, is there no mention on the BBC News of the year-long struggle by the Yellow Vests in France, especially Paris, and of the violence inflicted on them by their own security services? If you've not heard about that, then go look for it and prepare to be a bit shocked. Anyway, what do you think about the BBC? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.